You're Missing Out is sponsored by Audible. As part of my New Year's resolution, I told myself I'd read more and listen to new audiobooks. With Audible, it's easier than ever to find titles and time in my routine to reach my goal. Every month, members get 1 credit to pick any title, plus 2 Audible originals from a monthly selection, as well as access to daily news digests from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post. Right now, you can visit audibletrial.com/YMO podcast and get 2 audiobooks on behalf of the show. You can download thousands of different titles and listen offline, anytime, anywhere. Download the free Audible app on your favorite smartphone and tablet devices without ever losing your spot. Having a hard time deciding what to listen to? No worries. You can keep your credits for up to a year and use them to binge on a whole series if you'd like. This is the best way to find a new title to fall in love with, all while supporting your favorite National Film Registry podcast. Once again, that's audibletrial.com/YMO podcast to start your free trial and get 2 free audiobooks on us. Thank you for your support.
And now, on with the show.
Okay, gentlemen. I want to know what you think a Best Picture winner that you think people are too rough on.
Um, I'll say it's not really recent anymore. It's almost 15 years old at this point, but mainly because a good friend of ours gives it way too much shit, and I feel like I have to defend it all the time. I think The Departed gets way too much shit for winning Best Picture. No, it is not one of Scorsese's best, but it is Scorsese's best of that decade. Come at me, I don't care. It's very entertaining. It's very well written. I like it a lot. I think it's great. And I mean, what did you want to win that year? Like, I'm sorry, but get over it. The Departed rips, it roars, and some might even say it's a hoot and a holler.
I think it's so interesting, Tom, that you say that. What did you want to win? Because that's sort of something I've been considering. People tend to dunk on certain Best Picture winners solely because, or largely because of what it beat out. Something like Shakespeare in Love gets a lot of flack, and I wonder, would it get as much flack if it weren't the movie that beat Saving Private Ryan, right? Or Chicago. I remember in college, it was very hip to really dunk on Chicago winning Best Picture because it beat out Gangs of New York, which is not even particularly a strong one to ride for, right? It Dances with Wolves beating Goodfellas, things like that. But the one I think people are really too hard on for a very weird reason, and I've said this before, is The Artist. Because most of the people I know who really come down on The Artist haven't seen it. I would venture to guess it's one of the least seen, if not the least seen, recent Best Picture winner. It's a really good, well-made film that's doing something really interesting, but people just got it in their heads that, the standard things you always hear. Oh, the Oscars like rewarding movies about movies. They like patting themselves on the back, and that's why it won. The thing that strikes me about it is that this isn't even a year that has a particular favorite. The Artist year, like, okay, if we're really gonna dunk on The Artist, like, what were we in favor of? The Descendants? Extremely loud and incredibly close. Like, the only 2 films out of those Best Picture nominees that people still talk about are The Tree of Life, which is divisive at best, and Moneyball, which I think is a good movie. It's a serviceable film. It's a great film. I enjoy watching it when it's on, but it's like, this is not a situation of Crash beating Brokeback Mountain, or anything like that. I think people should watch it. The Artist is very good. It's really interesting, and it's just this weird case of, I think that the most vocal opponents of that movie winning Best Picture have not seen it and just know what they have decided it is. So I think The Artist gets a real bad rap. Every year since 1989, the Library of Congress has selected 25 films to add to the National Film Registry. The criteria? The films must be culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant.
Each week on You're Missing Out, we take a look at one of these films to try and get to the heart of why they were selected and why they still matter.
This week, Patrick Kotner from the George Lucas Talk Show returns to the show to discuss How Green Was My Valley and Star Wars Jedi Power Battles.
You know our guest is the producer and co-host of the George Lucas Talk Show, the producer of Rat Scraps, and from being a very cute boy, Patrick Kottner joins us on the show again. Patrick, thank you so much for
Yeah,
joining us.
you did it. You
I
said it
did
exactly
indeed.
like I wanted you to. That's great. How are you guys?
We're doing great. Welcome
That's
back
good.
to the mayhem.
Thank you.
We're very excited to have you back for a couple of reasons. One, I should tell you, and I have not told you this before, you are if you don't count like bonus episodes, you
Mhm.
have the second highest rated episode in our entire season.
Whoa.
It's
That's
a
rad.
huge hit. Yeah, yeah.
Can I ask who number 1 was?
Of course, it's David Sims talking about The Crowd.
Of course it is. All right. I mean, I can't compete. I'm from the US. I get it.
Can I tell you, you've come very close at times. It
Oh,
bounces
wow, okay.
back and forth. The funnier thing about that is because a friend of ours, Phil Iskov, has talked to us about like, well, you want to on their show, well, when we pick the films that obviously are more seen, those do better. And what's weird for us is our second best episode is the one that pretty much everyone has seen, Star Wars, and our first
Yes.
highest rated episode is The Crowd, a movie that you cannot legally watch anywhere and haven't been
Yeah.
able to for decades.
I don't even know what it is.
It's a King Vidor movie
Oh,
from
sure. Okay.
1927. It's an incredible movie. I highly recommend it. But there's no legal way to watch it, so I might have to send you a link to a Google Drive. I don't know.
It's so crazy
that's how
that
people
I'm
do
sorry to get right into this like this,
Yeah.
but it's so crazy that movies like that aren't just available places cuz like who is it costing money to like not have it streaming? So, like it's
Yeah.
not going to cost them an arm and a leg to like put it up on Criterion or put it up in freaking Hulu or something, like why keep that away from people?
Crazier,
I
it's
guess
Warner Brothers. They could just pop it on HBO Max.
it's so weird. It's so weird.
Yeah. But we're also excited to have you back because you are the only person to pick their season 2 movie
Oh, no.
before season 1 was over. We may have the original audio, we may not. Maybe we'll play that here, maybe we won't. But the
Mhm.
way that this happened, I re-listened to it today, was that you were last on our show to talk about Star Wars,
Yeah.
the 1977 motion picture.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
That you know fairly well. You currently co-host a talk show that partially impersonates the director of Star Wars. So
Sure.
and then you ended by saying, "Guys, we didn't even get a chance to talk about Jedi power battles." So that I know, when I first pitched it to you, I pitched it to you in the spur of the moment, right when we finished our panel.
No, I love it. I'm so glad you asked. Thank you.
Well, and
We didn't even get to talk about the PlayStation 1 game Jedi Power Battles.
Next.
or Masters of Terracossi.
Or Masters of Terracotta. So many things.
I mean, they just re-released a remastered version of Pod Racer.
Now, Tom, I just want to jump on what you just said, which is, hey, next year, come on to talk about Jedi Power Battles. And that makes me want to believe that next year we can have Patrick on for like one of the, like for How Green Was My Valley, and half of it will still be Jedi Power Battles talk.
I would truly love to do that so much. Oh no.
Like, he's gonna go back for Green Bay Valley and talk about that, and you went, I would love to come. I will do it. I've never seen it, but I will come back to talk about How Green Is My Valley on the condition that it is 50-50 How Green Is My Valley and Jedi Power Battles.
And I want to say, before recording, I'm not here to blow up anyone's spot. You did say you're not sure if we'll be able to do 50% on Jedi Power Battles, and I'm here to hold your feet to the dang fire.
Well, I say that because now everyone on mic has in fact played the PlayStation 1 game Jedi Power Battles. And spoilers for the second half of this episode, I am not terribly good at it.
Sure.
I say I couldn't do 50%, that might be because through all 6 lives of all 5 Jedi options, I did not get past level 1 at all.
Well, save it. We'll talk about it in a little bit. That's amazing.
We will. But you are first here to talk about How Green Was My Valley.
Yeah.
Now, this was a film that you had not seen before, correct?
No, I'd never seen it. I had heard of it, just from the Academy Awards and everything, but I'd never seen it. I knew nothing about it until today.
So what I'm excited about with this episode, when you look at the National Film Registry and the films that are picked, in season 1, with the exception of The Crowd, which is hard to find, with the exception of all of those are to some degree canonical classics, right? And today we're talking about a John Ford film. in season 1, we had 2 John Ford films, The Searchers and Grapes of Wrath. Now, those are both still held up as classic John Ford movies. The interesting thing about How Green Was My Valley is that I would go so far, and you said you'd heard about it, I would go so far as to suggest, and feel free to disagree, that its reputation today is primarily it's the movie that beat Citizen Kane. Right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's the only reason. I knew that it won Best Picture, and that was truly all I knew about it. My roommate actually, I came out into our living room a couple months ago, maybe like 4 or 5 months ago, and he was watching the movie on his own. And I went, oh no, I need to go back in my room. I cannot watch this now. I need to watch this in a couple months. So I just went and locked myself back in my bedroom and had to come back out 2 hours later when he was done.
I mean, that's the level of commitment to this program that I really
Yeah.
appreciate.
Yeah. Well, here's the reason. I knew I wasn't going to want to watch it twice, you know?
Well, that's
Fair enough.
That's the interesting thing. So, it is a movie that not only do most people know it as just the movie that beat Citizen Kane and how egregious that is, which is the kind of thing that, like, I think Ordinary People carries that reputation because of beating Raging Bull. There are certain movies, Crash, like, there are certain movies that have this albatross around their neck, not even about the film itself, but just like, this beat blank. And I think that I can speak to Tom, not to my experience, and Tom can speak to himself, but the first time I watched How Green Was My Valley was in early 2020, back when we thought lockdown was lasting 2 weeks. And I thought, well, I've got this time off. Why don't I watch all the Best Picture winners I've never seen? And I watched it and kind of just shrugged it off, saying, it's kind of meh. And Tom, I mean, your first time watching it was what, a couple months ago, right?
Yeah, I've watched it last summer because we had a little false start in terms of recording this season. I thought I was going to get a jump on it, and I did, just a much bigger jump than I thought I was getting.
So the interesting thing about it is when it pops up in the registry, you know, you have this feeling of, oh, that's that got in second. But what I think is interesting is that Tom and I both rewatched it in the lead up to the show, and I've watched it, you know, a second time after that. And what I think is interesting about this movie is it's a movie that feels very dull and samey and Oscar baity and whatever if you are watching it as the movie that beat Citizen Kane.
Sure.
What I hope we can get to through this episode is that there is actually a lot about this movie that is really engaging and emotional and worthwhile and worthy of its selection if you watch it divorced of that. If you watch it as How Green Was My Valley. And so I've now seen it 3 times. Tom's seen it 2. You've seen it 1. I think it's going to be a lot of fun for us to kind of go through this. And, you know, we always say the point of the show is to help people figure out why this film matters. I think we all get to kind of go through this and ourselves figure out why this film matters. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun. To kick this off, let's talk about why the registry said they selected it. They said, a seamless collaboration of creative talent, both credited and uncredited, lies behind the success of 1941's Best Picture winner, How Green Was My Valley. Much of the dialogue arises directly from Richard Llewellyn's novel of a Welsh mining community, while Philip Dunn's screenplay gives the film its episodic structure and reflective narrative voice. William Wyler served as director through pre-production and supervised location scouting and set construction, as well as the crucial casting of Roddy McDowall in the lead role. John Ford took the Dunn screenplay and Wyler sets and staged scenes in his own style. Finally, Fox mogul Darryl Zanuck took all of Ford's footage and supervised the final edit, as he did on many of the projects he oversaw both at Warner Brothers and Fox. Not actually particularly reflective of why they selected it. So let's talk about How Green Was My Valley and its place in film history. And I would say there's certainly obvious comparisons to Kane, but I think our goal today would be let's talk about this movie as How Green Was My Valley, as opposed to in relation to Kane. Though, obviously, if it's an opportunity for Tom to talk about Orson Welles, he's going to talk about Orson Welles. This is going to happen. So everybody make peace with it now.
Yeah, deal with it, guys. Sorry.
So I have to ask, before we get into, all this stuff that Null taking Tom to do, Patrick, what was your first impression of this film? Seeing it for the first time, what surprised you about it, considering what you did or didn't know about it? What struck you about it?
Yeah, I mean, I knew nothing about it. The thing that first got me was that Maureen O'Hara's in it, and I met Maureen O'Hara when I was a kid.
Really?
Yeah. She came to the God, I don't even know what it's called, the New England aviation museum or something like that. It's in Connecticut, and it's like a museum of old airplanes. Like the guy who dropped the atomic bomb, the pilot from that plane used to come there. I have no idea why she came there. I think she had a book out, maybe, but I was probably maybe 8 or 9 years old, and it was my dad, and it was me, and it was like 200 horny 80-year-old men who were like, Maureen O'Hara was the hottie back in my day. Like it was like a lot of that. And I don't think I had seen any more. No, what's the one that she's in with John Wayne? The big one.
Quiet Man?
Yeah. I'd seen The Quiet Man around that time, and obviously, you're an 8 or 9-year-old. No, excuse me. No, wait, it was not The Quiet Man. It was McClintock. We watched McClintock.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we watched McClintock, which I don't really remember. I just remember watching it. That's very funny. I'm looking at a Wikipedia page now. That's why I thought of it. But yeah, so this was the first Maureen O'Hara movie I'd seen in a very long time. So that was surprising to me. I was very happy to see it. I remember her being a very nice old woman in her mid 80s, I think, at the time. But that was about it. When I was watching it, there were some shots in it that I was like, oh, if this shot was in like an A24 movie right now, people would be like, oh my gosh, this is the best cinematography I've seen in my life. Like, there were shots that reminded me of The Lighthouse in it.
Yeah.
It was just
yeah.
like framing of the guys outside, like standing on the hill looking up at the, everything going on up there. And I think that was what struck me the most, was that I just liked how it was shot. I liked the set, the town was very cool. I enjoyed it. And very young Roddy McDowall was fun too. I was talking to my roommate. I was like, oh, I remember when he died, and it was like, yeah, he's like 70 years old when he died. And he died in 1998, which just shows how old this movie is.
Yeah, and he's he's one of those things. He was such a find. We'll get into the trivia later, but he was such a find for Weiler and Zanuck and all that originally the film was supposed to be half the child version of How and half an adult version.
Sure.
And once they found Roddy McDowall, they thought he was so compelling, and they felt he could really play How aging upward, that they cut the adult part down to just a voiceover. Because they basically felt like, you need this kid on screen.
Interesting. Now, was the guy who did the voiceover, do you know, was he supposed to do it on screen too?
I don't think they went that far.
Sure. Yeah.
I think I didn't hear anything about that one way or the other, but yes, that was the thing. Now, I want to drop a quick bit of amazing trivia on y'all. I've been holding on to this one for a while. Do either of you know anything about the book and its author, Richard Llewellyn?
No.
Okay, so this book was a massive hit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Richard Llewellyn was obviously celebrated for it. I mean, this book was, to give you an idea of how big a hit this was, and you can kind of feel it when you're watching it a bit. Darryl Zanuck originally envisioned this as a 4-hour color epic. His version, Fox's version of Gone with the Wind, which you can kind of see as you watch it. And when William Wyler was brought on, that was the idea, was William Wyler can do this big epic. And this was based, Richard Llewellyn told the story of how this was based on, it all was based on his life, that he was born in small town Wales. His family was so poor, he had no birth certificate, and that he was the only record of his birth was in like a family diary that was lost in a fire after all the mines shut down. But this was like profound to people. Like, think about what this, what this young boy goes through in this book, and
Sure.
people were just so moved that like Richard Llewellyn, this was his life, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, losing his father in the mines, losing his oldest brother, all of that. What's interesting is that later we found out none of that's true.
Great.
He
Great.
Felt
was
that coming.
he was born in England. Did not actually spend any time in Wales until
Oh.
after the book.
Oh no.
He was of Welsh descent, but he just took stories from the lives of people he had worked with who had told him these stories. So all of it is lies.
I mean,
Yeah,
listen,
why not?
if I'm writing a book in the 30s or whenever this book came out, sure, you say whatever you want. Like, there's no way anyone's going to be able to find that for a very long time. And I'm looking now, he died in the 80s. So it's like, yeah, sure, that makes more sense that they would be able to like look that kind of thing up then. But in the 30s, yeah, say whatever you want, man. That's my take.
The two things to me that strike me as funny is I was reading up, and apparently people in Wales read the book and were like, "What the fuck is this? Like, that's not. This doesn't
Uh-huh.
feel right." But then it became such a hit, and then the movie was so a romanticized version of Wales. And let's face it, the Welsh don't get a lot.
Yeah,
We don't really depict Wales a lot. That they just kind of rolled with it, and now they're like, "Hell yeah, sure, we're all in on this."
sure.
Also interesting because this film was eventually directed by John Ford. John Ford, who always claimed that he was born Sean Aloysius O'Fearna on February 1st, 1895.
Mm-hmm.
But then the Registry of Births for Cape Elizabeth, Maine records the birth of John Martin Feeney on February 1st,
Oh my
1894.
Oh
He
my
lied about
gosh.
the year and he lied about the name. So it's a marriage of fabulists.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, but I thought I've been sitting on this one for a bit that this was such a hit because of its authenticity,
Yeah.
because of its, sincerity, and then nope, just nope.
So funny.
Wild.
Not even close.
I love it.
It was the million little pieces of its day.
Yes.
Like, it's truly insane.
Is that the like? I'm
Um,
trying to think of other times that has happened. Is that like
Where something has been
Yeah.
Well,
just like totally discredited?
I feel like there have been other times, but I think it's one of those things where most of those times those kind of sensations get a little strangled early because people are doing that level of research.
Sure.
The thing that made Million Little Pieces so jarring was the fact that it was Oprah's book club and everything. Like, it skyrocketed so quickly before it got exposed. But yeah, so Weiler was originally supposed to do this. It was supposed to be not only was it supposed to be 4 hours and Technicolor, but they wanted to film it in Wales.
Mm.
They wanted to actually go and film it in Wales. And then World War II happened. So they couldn't go film it in Wales.
Sure.
And the studio started to panic because William Wyler was known for going over budget and for being kind of difficult and not playing the game. So they got rid of Wyler and they brought in John Ford because John Ford is known for being efficient,
Mm-hmm.
almost cold in a way, and just doing what he's got to get done. It was Ford's decision to recreate Wales in Malibu, California. And what I think is so incredible about that is that if you looked at this mining town and I told you, yes, this was filmed in Wales, I don't think anybody would question it.
Yeah.
It certainly does not look like the Santa Monica Mountain, but they built an 80-acre replica.
I think it kind of just goes to your point that the Welsh don't really get much, so we don't have a frame of
This
reference
is true.
here, other than this complete fugazi that is How Green Is My Valley.
Yeah, so Ford put it together, but it's an amazing thing about this, I think. And I don't know, Patrick, are you a big John Ford fan? Are you familiar with his work?
I've seen a couple. I saw The Searchers. It was one of the last things I saw right before lockdown in 2020. I was in LA, and this weirdly coincides with the other half of this podcast. I was there, and Matt Martin, who's one of the Lucasfilm Story Group guys, was doing a series of film screenings at the Alamo in LA of movies that inspired George Lucas, and I just happened to be there when they were showing The Searchers, because there's a lot of like Attack of the Clones when Anakin's looking for his mother and stuff that like is very similar to The Searchers. That might be the only one I've seen of his. I'm looking through the list right now to see if there's anything else, but that's the big one. I'm not a
Well,
huge Western guy.
the thing that makes this interesting in a way
Yeah.
is that and Tom is obviously has been deep down a John Ford rabbit hole in prep for this, so I'm sure Tom
Oh
can
yeah.
speak to this too. The thing that's so interesting, and it's a weird thing we deal with sometimes when we talk about the auteur theory,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, I don't know where you stand on the entire idea of the auteur theory, Patrick. How do you, do you buy into that fully? Do you have some reservations?
I think there are definitely people who can fall into that category. I think it gets thrown around a little loosely sometimes.
Mhm.
And I think maybe, like someone, a John Ford or a Hitchcock or someone like that, where like, yeah, of course, even like a Kurosawa or something, someone of that ilk. I definitely see it, but I feel like that auteur, I feel like it's thrown around by a lot of people who don't necessarily know what it means at this point.
Mhm. It's the reason I bring that up is that this very film, can either be confirmation or refutation of the auteur theory,
Mm,
depending on how you look at it. Because the weird thing about it is, when we talk about auteurs, we have this vision. It's not how it was originally intended, but now the idea is like somebody who does everything,
mm,
right?
mm-hmm.
That they're involved in every step of the process. In which case, this is definitely not that, because when John Ford took this on, the screenplay was already written,
Sure, sure.
and William Wyler had already cast it and staged it, and Zanuck was very much in control and did the edits. Ford was seemingly not that involved in much beyond the actual act of directing on this film, and yet the thing that's so interesting about that is this. The thing that's so interesting about this is that it still feels like a John Ford movie.
Mm-hmm.
It so much so that you're noticing trademarks of his not just visual style, but even his storytelling style. And elements of his actual life. I mean, the whole bit about how being bedridden, right, as a
Mm-hmm.
child and having to learn through books, that actually happened to Ford.
Hmm.
Ford had a childhood bout of diphtheria and lost a year of school and learned to become more introspective and embraced books. And I think that something that's so interesting is that wasn't obviously Ford's. It's not Ford's book. It's not Ford's script. It's not Ford's cast. And yet something as simple as Roddy McDowall starting out with one book and then you just showing the shelf of books
Sure.
to convey the passage of time. That's something of Ford's voice. Even though, I mean, again, I'll throw to you, Tom, because you're much more into Ford and the totality of his work. But you see what I'm saying about it being kind of feeling like a Ford film, despite him not being.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, the auteur thing, about how people simplify it so much when really it's a lot more complicated than that, because yeah, none of this was started by Ford. He was a work for hire basically, but his view of things and the things that he was interested in was so consistent throughout his career that he could easily see a story like this and be like, "Oh, yeah, this is a story I want to do." Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of things that I connect to. I'm sure he focuses on other things, highlights other things. I mean, because I talk about this with Mike all the time. He's a rowdy filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
He's got that rowdy, drunken Irish, like, oh, it's just boys being boys. We're gonna have like, he's a guy who likes making movies where dudes rock.
Sure.
That's like his
Sure.
like main thing. Dudes rock. So like, there's like a whole chunk of the movie that's just about, Hugh learning how to box, and then his boxing teacher's beating up his teacher at school because, well, dudes rock. And there's a lot of, oh yeah, we're celebrating and drinking and partying and having fun and all of that. And then the more you watch his stuff, you see his interests in social issues and all of that. um, I know it's easy for people these days to kind of nail him as a like right wing guy or whatever, or not particularly great when it comes to Native American stuff in cinema, which that's a whole other discussion since that's not this movie. But the year before, I think a companion piece he made, Grapes of Wrath, and that's another movie about the working class being absolutely put upon and destroyed by the horrible nature of capitalism and lack of unions and lack of workers' rights and all of that stuff. And that's just kind of a thing he was chasing for a while. And again, he's an auteur, but he this was a work for hire, and he didn't even edit the goddamn movie, and he was off. He made 3 movies this year that this movie came out. So
What were the other two?
Hold on, let me bring it up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't mean to make you dig for that. I just thought you had that on.
No, it's not digging. It's not like I have a tiny little computer in my pocket that I'm not using to record on this big computer. Excuse me, 2 in 41. Tobacco Road was his second movie in 1941.
And then he goes to war. So
Yeah, that's true. It's interesting, Tom, you mentioned about the labor element of this. This is one of those things where I feel like, and I don't know, Patrick, you went in not knowing anything about the film. The first time I watched it, what I had read was a synopsis that said this is about a Welsh mining strike
Yeah.
and labor relations. To me, when I watched it with that sentence in mind, it was weird. The movie was confounding because I was like, it's not really about that at all. Like
Yeah.
that's a plot point. But I also have to imagine, if you don't know anything about this, looking at a film from the early 40s, to hear that talk of, not just talk of unions, but to have a preacher come out and be pro labor in a film, I would imagine that's also kind of surprising, and that you don't expect from a film of that time.
Yeah, it definitely is. That's the backdrop. I feel like a lot of movies get described that way, where they'll be like, I'm trying to think of an example, where they will say something like, "Oh, this is a movie about a mining town." It's like, yeah, okay, but that's just in the background, really, and it is part of the movie, but it's not very prevalent throughout the whole thing. It's more about the family and the kid and everybody.
and the strike's over in like 10 minutes.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's interesting because, the first time I watched it, I felt this isn't really about the strike.
Mm-hmm.
And then watching it again the second time, it struck me that it is, in the same way that To Kill a Mockingbird is about the trial.
Sure. Yes, that's a great example.
Both works are through the eyes of a child. And in this time watching it, I was really struck by that, because the thing that I found so compelling is this movie is about a labor strike, and it's neither pro or anti-union, because what it's actually about is the social hardening that comes with the dispute, in the same way that, like, Spike Lee often talks about how he hates when people come up to him and ask, did Mookie do the right thing?
Mm-hmm.
Or asks him, who started it in Do the Right Thing?
Sure.
Because it's not about that. It doesn't matter whether you think Sal should have had, quote, black people on the wall, or Bugging Out shouldn't have started a fight. It's about how something happened and the community can't be, you can't go back to how it was before. There's a point in this when, there's the line, when the kid asks where it means, it means something has gone out of the valley that cannot be replaced. It doesn't matter. In Howe's eyes, it's not, he never sees, Howe never sees the people working in the mines, or the people who own the mines.
Mm-hmm.
The only time you see the mine owner is when he comes to try and get his son married off to the daughter. And Howe doesn't understand what the actual conditions are in the mine, besides there's less money. All he knows is that his brothers were pro-union. His father, who had been the spokesman, is not in favor of the union. And because his father is not in favor of the union, not actively against it even, not protesting it, but just is not in favor, people start hanging around the house and glaring at him. And it gets so bad that his mother has to intervene and say to them, if you, in a very, I can't speak for the Welsh, but Ford is Irish, in a very Irish way, saying, any of you bother my husband, I'll come and strike you with my own bare hands. I thought that was very interesting, because it seems like the message of the film is later explicitly stated. There's the line, they knew my father had opposed the strike, now it was them that opposed him. It's a condemnation of mob mentality, rather than a condemnation of unionizing or a condemnation of naked capitalism in the way that Ford's previous film Grapes of Wrath, obviously because of the source material, takes a very hard stance. This feels a little more like it's saying whether you want to blame it on the unions or whether you want to blame it on the mine owners, at some point somebody did something and my community was destroyed.
I don't necessarily know if that's. I think it's not so much mob mentality, and it is actually like Grapes of Wrath, a stirring indictment of capitalism and how like a mining company like this can crop up in town and basically become the only source of income for town, and based on being the only thing giving these people lives, it can like twist the way they think and make them think that the mine is important and each other isn't, and that like you get this, like the father basically kicks his sons out of the house because he goes, oh well, you're talking about socialism there, I mean, not
Yeah.
like that's relevant these days, but because people in this town have been so completely brainwashed that the company's good, making money for the company is good, the company will be nice to us if we just let them pay us less, and it'll eventually work out for us. And then it doesn't. I mean, even to the point that the daughter is married off to the mine owner's son, and her brothers still get fucking laid off. It's because it's so much about everything in this town becomes the mine gets too much power. It doesn't care about the people, but the people have been so convinced that, well, mine's good. We got to be nice to the mine, and anybody trying to, make things right, which, like the son says, this isn't about socialism. This is about what's right. I think it's much more about how capitalism turns us against each other.
And listen, I know tempers are high right now. We're getting a little worked up about this movie, but I think there's one thing that we can all agree on, and that's none of us should ever try to work in a mine because it seems awful and it seems terrible. And every time I see something set in a mine, I'm like, I would never survive this. I would be one of the first people to die. And that's exactly what I thought while I was watching this movie today. I was like, yeah, this is bad. This is bad.
Yeah, not
And-
great. You just get painted with black dust that might not be able to rub off your skin
Yeah.
the rest of your life.
Yeah.
The only reason I say that is there is that line later, which I think is insanely radical for its time, that you have a clergyman take a stance on labor relations,
Mm.
and to explicitly have him say, you have that moment where Walter Pidgeon says, like, you know what, I'll say it, I'm pro-union. Like, I think that it's supporting your neighbors. It's about doing all this, and he is essentially connecting the labor struggle to Christianity, but he does also say that line, but remember, with strength comes responsibility. You cannot combat injustice with more injustice, only justice. And that's what I mean, is I think that there was this idea from Ford in this film and in this text, that is the idea of do not just this idea, especially from the perspective of the young boy, of like, okay, all I'm hearing is these people saying they're doing what's right for the community, these people saying they're doing what's right for the community, and ultimately it's gone. That his understanding, even though, I mean, think about the fact that this character was supposed to go off and get a higher education, and what does he end up doing? He goes to work in the mines like his father, and even then, even after going and working in the mines, he still has to leave the valley.
Yeah, all right, so here's the thing. I don't think they actually made a union. I just thought they went on strike because they keep getting fired. That's not a union. They just went on strike. I think a part of it is that some people wanted to go start a union. The father didn't, and it caused this political division throughout the town that starts from the top with the corporation making people have to choose sides. Do you guys want to be treated right with equal pay? Because then we're not going to make enough money and we might not be able to pay you. Or do you guys want to just, make things easier for us while you guys go digging for dirty clumps of shit in the earth for 1 shilling an hour or a shilling a day, whatever the hell the pay was. Like, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I've seen the movie twice. I don't think they actually started a union. I think that's why, even because the Walter Pigeon saying that is after the strike, I think, right? I mean, I
Yes,
don't think
that's
they
after the
started a
strike, yeah.
union. Yeah, they don't start a union.
It's still in discussion at that point. It hasn't actually begun. That's the thing.
Yeah, because there's never a moment like you're talking about with responsibility and everything. There's never a moment of like, this isn't the Irishman where you're seeing like the unions being used wrong,
Mhm.
being achieved in the wrong way, or criminalities taking part. Now, Jimmy Hoffa's not running around calling people dumb motherfuckers.
Although that sounds like a great movie if he was.
I mean, listen, I'd watch it. I'm just saying, remake of How
Uh-huh.
Green Is My Valley, Al Pacino running around doing whatever accent that was in The Irishman.
I heard you
Um,
paint valleys. Is that what it could be?
I heard you paint valleys. But yeah, I think so. That's my thing. I don't think it actually gets into any of that stuff because they don't even get to that point because they've been so divided on the politics of even like basic human rights for workers that a father who seems to be a good guy and gets a lot of the attention from the other workers at the mine is just like, well, no, that's socialism, that's bad. Well, where does he get that shit from? We clearly see later he's not like a book smart man. He's learning math and all that and proper English while his son is doing it, giving his wife shit for not wanting to learn. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just saying I don't think that's where the movie's coming from. If only because, like again with the auteur thing, it's kind of flip floppy with Ford since this is a work for hire thing. I think with Grapes of Wrath, I think he very comes down clearly, and having Walter Pigeon say it means he's very clearly saying, "You guys need to start a union, stop fighting with each other,
Mm-hmm.
and make sure these assholes don't, marry your daughter, run off to the South Africa, and then fire everybody because people from other valleys around Wales will work for less."
I don't disagree with that. I think it's rather the case that, again, I go back to that line that Pigeon has where he says, remember, you can't fight injustice with more injustice, and remember, that with strength comes responsibility, because the other factor that we haven't touched on yet, that also makes this film, I think, pretty bold, is the fact that it's also a condemnation of the clergy and the church community within the town.
Yeah.
Because you have that moment where the elder priest, the senior clergyman, calls up the woman who was having a child out of wedlock and excoriates her in front of the town, and only Maureen O'Hara stands up to him, and then that woman is chased out of town, and that of course comes back around when they start attacking Walter Pigeon for the rumor that Maureen O'Hara is going to leave her husband for him, which is not even the case, but just the rumor and the conjecture of it. And I look at that and I felt, looking at it, that they were trying to draw some kind of parallel between that emphasis, because the film does emphasize that way of, because my father opposed the union, the town turned on him. And later that, here is Griffith, this preacher who is educated and kind and helps how to walk again. Like, he's just wonderful. There's nothing wrong with this man. He's great. And the church turns on him. And you have even the father makes that statement that I thought is pretty wild for a movie in 41, where he basically says, are you going to church? And he goes, I'm not. And if they do what they're going to do, I'm never going again.
Yeah.
I mean, Ford, I think that, and especially something with like having it be this Christian church. And of course, Ford was, a religious person, Irish, deeply religious, deeply Catholic, and dealing with that idea of, the persecuted minority that Catholics were in Ireland. And of course, Christians were, the Roman times. I think there's something interesting about the idea of the church represents another example of, it should be what a church is meant to be, is a place where the community comes together, and a place of compassion, and a place of helping the needy and helping those who need help, and it has now gotten so vindictive that it's lost sight of that. And that's what Griffith says when he makes that statement saying, you fellas should have a union. They say, well, you're speaking out of your place. And he goes, my place is wherever there's injustice that I see, and I should speak out against it, which is very similar to Henry Fonda's lines at the end of Grapes of Wrath of wherever there's somebody getting, I don't remember the exact wording. I should know. It's quoted in like 95 Looney Tunes, but you guys know what I mean, right? Wherever
and every Batman movie.
Yeah, wherever there's blank, I'll be there. Wherever there's
Yeah.
wherever there's injustice, you know what I'm saying. You know that thing.
Sure.
It's very similar to that. But I just think that it's because of its vantage point. Its vantage point of young Hal. I think that there is something in this movie about the idea of basically saying a community, and what this community was originally, at least as Hal knew it, is this. We look out for each other. This is a place where people know each other and they look out for each other in everything, and then that just kind of, it was gone and it could never come back. And I think that, this is in a way, I was trying to think of how to describe this film in terms of on the one hand, it's a pastoral, it's this nostalgic look at life in the country. But there's this specific subcategory of movie, I think, and I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about, in terms of like a movie that is explicitly about reflecting on the moment right before an era died. Like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas is obviously Hunter Thompson's treatise on sort of the high watermark of the 60s. Recently, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is very much, that entire Rolling Stones montage of the lights coming out in LA for, of all these places that have shut down. Fiddler on the Roof is an older version of that. I feel like there's this specific kind of movie that is very much about, this was a time and a place, and it just is gone now. I'm gonna say it. I hate it. I just thought it's gone with the wind. It's that's how it has gone. It has passed. You can see that connection. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It's I think that's kind of and I the thing that I thought was interesting is and I know this is probably more true for Patrick than Tom, just because I know your viewing histories. But Patrick, did you end up when you were a kid? Did you watch a lot of those live action Disney movies from like the 50s and 60s? Did you get a lot?
Oh yeah, and also, I don't know if you know this, during a lot of lockdown, starting when Disney Plus came out, my roommate and I said,
right, of course,
we're gonna watch every theatrically released movie on Disney Plus in chronological order. So we watched every single one of those things, every the Pollyannas and every nature documentary and
those Callaways,
Candle Shoe, and those Callaways was a demarcation point in our apartment, because that was when we took like 2 months off. We were like, I can't finish watching those Callaways. That was like, it was a big moment for us.
There's so many of those. Any of those, because Walt Disney himself was obviously very, as much as he was a futurist, he was very nostalgic. For Marceline and all. That's Main Street and all the parks, and so there are so many of those movies, so dear to my heart, and even the one that no one's seen, Song of the South. They all have that feel to it. And the thing that I thought was so interesting about this was that it would be very easy to zone out during this movie, half watch it, and mistake it for one of those.
Yeah, who would do that? Who would zone out midway through watching this movie? I don't know anyone who would do that.
Well, I think it's like, it's one of those things where like there's a lot of darkness going on in this movie, but it's still playful because it's still through a child's eyes. And I think the one thing, like Tom brought it up earlier, but the one moment of this movie that to me goes full old early Disney movie is the boxing stuff. That this movie is about a family in turmoil and about so much crisis, and I think it can be jarring the first time to watch this, and then all of a sudden it just takes a detour into this very light scene about boy gets bullied at school, gets taught to box, teacher whips him, so the old townies show up and wallop the hell out of the teacher.
Yeah.
It feel like that's the one that if you told me that was in an old Fess Parker movie that played on Wonderful World of Color, I'd believe you. And I know, Tom, you've said that's your favorite part of the film.
I mean, obviously, it's about a bunch of drunken men from a mining town beating up a teacher for beating up a child. I mean, that's like
What
right
more
up
could
my
you
alley.
want?
I mean, exactly the best. Fuck Citizen Kane, is in my opinion. I kid. Don't haunt me tonight, Orson.
But the one thing I think is interesting about that is this is an episodic movie, right? I mean, there's not a single narrative running through it, much again in the same way as Gone with the Wind, kind of. There's not a singular plot in Gone with the Wind. It's kind of just these moments through Scarlett O'Hara's story. In the same way, I do think there's something about that scene that the first time I watched it felt very out of place, but now I think it does indicate, because how now he's leaving his valley, he does have to leave. He does have to move into the modern world. And I do think there's something about that scene that kind of conveys sort of I don't want to say a chip on his shoulder, but this idea of even if he's in mainstream society and he's got to wear a fancy suit and go all these places, the old town made sure to impart a bit of that into him, a bit of that fighting spirit, a bit of that grit. Especially because I think before the teacher gets beat up, the thing that I find so interesting about that second time around is that, the kids kind of bully him, but when he starts fighting back, the other kid seems to respect him.
Yeah, they respect each other. And then when the teacher starts whipping him, he tells him, well, he says he's not going to snitch and say why they're fighting. And then he tells him to bite down hard on the I don't know, the handkerchief.
Yeah, the little girl tells him to bite down on the handkerchief. Yeah,
and then the kid he's fighting with says, "Yeah, bite down hard."
Yeah,
they kind of have that little moment together. I just also love the moment with it, with all that stuff, because it comes back later when the father gets trapped and eventually killed in the mine at the end. And they're bringing, all the people are trying, like, oh, who's going to go down there? And the guy, Dai Bondo, the guy who teaches him how to fight, it's like, oh yeah, I'll go down there. I can still swing an axe. It's like, no, but you're blind.
Yeah.
You like, you got punched in the head too often. But he's still just like, well, no, like that's just the right thing to do. Like what I guess, because he's the only one that's not been poisoned by the mine.
Like, well, and you have
capitalism of the mind.
You have the very John Ford joke in there, like, because Ford does have his own sense of humor. You have that very John Ford moment when he turns to the other guy, Barry Fitzgerald, and he says, "Oh, will you come with me?" And he goes, "Well, no, I'm too much of a coward for that, but I'll hold your coat."
Yeah,
which is just a good little, Ford gag there. It's just. And it's funny talking about the teacher thing, now talking about it and thinking about it, it does go back to kind of the point, even, you were making, Tom, about the way that power kind of pits people against each other, because if anything, these kids are shitty to Roddy McDowall, but it's only because the actual person in power cracking the proverbial whip kind of pits them against each other.
Because it's a class thing. Because he's from the dirty little mining town, that dirty little valley. He's a little, he's got a shitty little accent, and go after him. He's one of the poors, which, it's all about fucking capitalism and class. It all sucks. Like, that's basically what Ford is getting at here. Capitalism and class and all this bullshit is gonna tear us all apart, and it's gonna. I mean, it popped in my head before, but like we're gonna cover this soon. I mean, this is just Harlan County, USA.
Yeah,
it's all about these companies come in, they make themselves seem like, oh, they're good for us, they're good for you guys, we're gonna make this town great, and then no, they bleed the town dry and leave everyone holding the bag at the end.
I mean, and I do want to highlight, Patrick, you started this off talking about the visuals on this, right? And I mean, there were certain moments. First off, it's very weird. I understand, everybody talks about Citizen Kane and how great it is and how it should have won and all that. The one thing that strikes me is when you hear the conversations about Kane and how unique it was and how boundary breaking it was, in contrast to, and they always contrast to How Green Was My Valley, like this ordinary
Sure.
movie. I think it's kind of striking when you watch this and see how many things that get attributed to Kane also happen in this movie. Like,
hmm
one of the things you always hear about Citizen Kane is he showed ceilings. He
Yes.
angled the cameras down and he showed ceilings.
Yes.
And then you're watching this, and to convey their little hovel that they live in,
Yeah.
Ford is letting you see the ceilings.
A lot of the ceiling.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great point.
And the same way that, like, Kane, they talk about, well, that opening, you know, you do the newsreel and it's, you know, you're telling us the whole story. And then that great moment where we push from the room where Mrs. Kane is talking about her kid out the window to Charlie Kane with the
Mhm.
sled. The first shot of this movie is panning from adult Hal packing his bag out a window. And then, like, the first 15 minutes of this movie are just montage with dialogue of Hal explaining everything. And
I mean, Mike, I'm gonna say it. It sounds like you're trying to start a beef between How Green Is My Valley and Citizen Kane again. A beef that was squashed almost 80 years ago, and you're trying to get it started again.
No, I'm truly not. It's truly just a case of, like, I do think that this movie's reputation as the movie that beat Citizen Kane, and the conversation around Citizen Kane being Hollywood just wasn't ready for it and how bold and daring it was, I think has created a larger disparity in people's minds between these two movies than there actually is.
I mean, it's literally the opposite of what happened at the time, which is fucking the industry kind of revolted against Citizen Kane because the PR machine made everyone hate Citizen Kane.
Yeah.
And, you know, it got booed and shit at the Oscars. You know, I mean, it's this narrative that it was like the little engine that could and everybody loved it. But, oh, no, How Green Was My Valley beat. That's not the case. It's
No.
not the case at all. And it's bullshit. And I think, to what Patrick was saying, I think Mike wants a companion piece to Mank. He wants Llewellyn about this weird little British man who pretends to be Welsh,
Big Welshman. No, but,
who
you know,
manages to con it. It's the informant. He wants
I was-
black and white, super
Yeah.
detailed, technical, with like, oh, we recorded it like they did in 1941, but about this weird man who tricks an industry into making his.
I
little
mean, it's
mining
not
movie.
it's
don't-
not a bad idea.
I
The
don't
Informant 2.
I don't like I don't like that we have now created a dynamic that's just Patrick and Tom gang up on Mike. I
Yeah.
didn't expect this happening, and now it's happening.
I'm totally fine with it.
I
Well,
was
if anybody's gonna gang up on Mike, obviously I'm teaming up with them.
is this Patrick? Is this just how you balance out what happens to you on George Lucas talk show? Because
Absolutely.
Griffin and Connor gang up on you, and now it's just you see this as the
Yeah.
as the
I
flip
need
side.
to. I get enough of it, and I say I'm not taking this when I go on other people's shows. If I have to deal with it, other people have to deal with it. And it's also, part of me just being stuck inside my house for almost a month. I just need to get it out somehow.
Okay,
Yes.
I'll say this last thing on Kane, and this is all I want to say, which is the thing that's interesting about it, and the way that it's set up is that, and the way that we talk about, like, oh, How Green Was My Valley beating Citizen Kane, I can tell you the person who would hate that dynamic the most is Orson Welles. Orson Welles was the biggest admirer of John Ford. You know, there's that great quote. I'm sure Tom knows where I'm going with this too, but where they say, you know, who are your influences? And Wells said, I admire the old masters, John Ford, and John Ford. And
Mhm.
that I was listening to the commentary track on the How Green Was My Valley Blu-ray. Wells starts working on Magnificent Ambersons right when How Green Was My Valley debuts, and really admired the film. And How Green Was My Valley is a big influence on Magnificent Ambersons.
He's such a big John Ford fan that it's almost like when he started making his movie, he was thinking in ways that Ford would think. And so there's these, shared visual elements to it. I mean, like, this movie does feel like the entire flashback to Kane as a kid with Rosebud, but like
Mm.
stretched out to the entire movie. Like, this is before we get to him owning the newspaper, you know?
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
it's and it just back to the auteur thing. Auteurs get their inspirations from somewhere, and it's not like fucking cinema was around for a good long time when Citizen Kane came out. He didn't have much to choose from. It was John Ford or, Minot. That doesn't
Well,
feel
Howard
right for Kane.
Hawks,
I know, but it's like
Right.
it's one of those things. Like, it's not like today where you could choose from 1,000 different filmmakers to work on. Who then you think, well, they're kind of just working from John Ford too. But
Now, this is a good time, unless anybody has any last How Green Was My Valley notes, to pivot to.
Oh, I do.
Yes. Oh, please go right ahead.
Well, because I think I kind of want to get into the, we've been discussing, oh, it beat Citizen Kane, but I feel like we should get into like the why it beat Citizen Kane, and which then gets into why it's in the registry.
Well, that's what I was going to say. We're about to talk about the Oscars.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it struck me watching it the second time, knowing what the movie is kind of helps you appreciate it more. Because first time I watched it, I was like, this is boring and kind of overlong. Then the second time I watched it, it moved pretty fast knowing what it was. But it struck me the second time, this is 1941. The Depression is still affecting everybody, even if it had ended, quote unquote, or was basically at the tail end of its run.
Yeah.
People knew full well what it was like to not work, what it was like for corporations and these businesses to throw people out and make people compete with each other, standing in front of the gates, seeing if we'll be the ones that are picked today, seeing their friends and family have to leave. It's a reason why Grapes of Wrath was such a big movie the year before, and I think it's a reason why How Green Was My Valley was so big in 41, and why people kind of weren't willing to see a movie about the kind of rich guy who would put people out of work during the Depression.
And, it's interesting you say that, Tom. To the other end of that, the war is going on,
It just started. Not for us. Just for us, but like...
Yeah, and so the war is going on, and think about another element of this movie, and a scene that I completely missed the first time I watched it. I noticed but didn't really focus on the second time, and then this time, watching it earlier today, I actually felt a ping, like a pain from it, is that moment, because obviously the children leave, and one, like I said, South Africa, some of the sons go to America, and there's that moment when the mother, Sarah Allgood, has a map in front of her, and she's drawing lines to try and connect where all of her children are. And number one, when you remember when this movie is set, you think about it, like, if your kids took off, if your son or daughter went off to another country, you just didn't see them again. Like you just didn't. They were just gone. And then think about how that must have felt to audiences for whom their sons are being sent off across the ocean the opposite direction. They're going off to Europe, they're going off to fight, and you don't know if you're ever going to see them again. A movie this sentimental about that idea of loss and that idea of, especially, like you said, Tom, here we are in America. Sure, there's a war raging in Europe, but whatever, there's a war raging in Europe. Who cares? Was the sentiment to some degree at the time. And then Pearl Harbor's attacked, and that's it. We're in the war, and I'd imagine a lot of Americans did have this feeling, like the movie suggests from Hal's point of view, of, I don't know what's going on, but something's lost now, and we're never getting it back.
I mean, especially because I don't think they ever specify exactly the year this story's, or the years this story takes place in, but it almost feels pretty clear that World War I's about to break out, and all of these boys, the Morgan boys, are probably going to end up fighting in World War I. And that's another thing, that's probably going to make life even worse for the Morgans in their Welsh life. And just, again, that thing, people watching it at the time, like, oh yeah, like my father went to World War I, or my son's now going to fight in Europe or Japan or whatever. It's, without ever being miserable, the movie's not like bleak, and it's not like, Citizen Kane's kind of a sarcastic movie. It's got a bit of an irony and a wink to it, which is not always immediately appreciated in cinematic form.
Yeah.
You got to assume, especially in 1941, people were maybe like, "Hey, things suck. Stop being fucking smart and just entertain me."
Well, do you guys think Frank Tree and Captain Wild Bill Kelso saw this movie?
Are the are those the
Motor
characters?
Sergeant Frank Tree
God,
and
are
Captain.
those the characters from 1941?
Yeah, they are.
Kyle, when you edit this, please keep in the sound of Patrick typing as he's searching the names of the characters from 1941. Wait! Oh my God! Patrick,
What?
truly, you saying that just reminded me of something that Tom and I both said we were going to bring up that we forgot to bring up. So that works great.
Yeah,
Which is
sure.
part of the
Oh,
reason
good.
this movie is in my view and Tom's view, is that no, it does not have the cultural cachet now that it did then. But to me, all of the movies that that we now describe as Amblin movies, I mean,
Mm,
that Tom made this observation to me that like the Smallville portion of John Williams' Superman score sounds very much like the score of this movie.
sure.
That so much
Interesting.
of the Amblin-esque stuff that Spielberg does and Lucas does, anything nostalgic that they do, a lot of it draws from this. I mean, Spielberg's a huge John Ford fan, but the fact that you see it in this movie in everything from, from the most obvious Amblin type movies to things like Empire of the Sun, any of this small town life and the small town America that we call Spielberg in, that everybody copies now all the way through to Ghostbusters Afterlife doing it. It's not hard to see that as Spielberg Americanizing the mining town in Wales in How Green Was My Valley.
Sure. Now, do you know who did the music for this?
I can look this up unless you have it
I don't
offhand.
want you to. I don't want you
Okay,
to.
I won't. I will
It's a
not.
man named Alfred Newman,
Oh, okay.
who
Yes.
whose son is David Newman, who did the music for Galaxy Quest and Jingle All the Way and Viva Rock Vegas and Norbit and Serenity, but whose nephew is motherfucking Randy Newman.
No way. Really?
Randy Newman's uncle did the music for this movie.
That's wild. Wow.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Alfred Newman won 9 Academy Awards, nominated 45 times.
He did not win this year. How Green's My Valley
Sure.
did not win score, and we can talk about why, which is so let's when we get to that one, I'll make a note of that one. So let's talk about this real quick. How Green Was My Valley won Best Picture. The other
Mhm.
nominees were Blossoms in the Dust, the aforementioned Citizen Kane, which is in the registry. Here Comes Mr.
Yeah.
Jordan, which is surprisingly not in the registry. Here Comes Mr. Jordan, Hold Back the Dawn, The Little Foxes, The Maltese Falcon, One Foot in Heaven, Sergeant York, and Suspicion. It was nominated for Best Director, which it won for John Ford, making it the second time because he had won the year prior for The Grapes of Wrath. Nominated for Best Supporting Actor for Donald Crisp. Donald Crisp won that year. So it did win Best Supporting Actor, even though arguably Donald Crisp is the lead of this movie. Or Roddy McDowall is the lead. They credit Walter Pidgeon and Maureen O'Hara as the leads. They're not. They're just above the title.
Sure.
Best Supporting Actress for Mary Allgood was a nomination, but she lost to Mary Astor for The Great Lie. It was nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay, lost to Here Comes Mr. Jordan. Here's the interesting one. It was nominated for Best Scoring of a Dramatic Picture, but it lost to a movie that is either called All That Money Can Buy or The Devil and Daniel Webster. It went by both titles. And that is also the only Oscar for legendary composer Bernard Herrmann.
Oh,
Really?
wow.
Right?
That's crazy.
Yeah. It was also nominated for Best Sound Recording, and it lost to That Hamilton Woman. It won Best Art Direction. It won Best Cinematography, Black and White, and it lost Best Film Editing to Sergeant York. So that is how Green Was My Valley fared at the Oscars.
I do also want to say, before people come for me, I know that Thomas Newman is also Alfred Newman's son. Thomas Newman, who did Shawshank and Cinderella Man and Wall-E and Skyfall and 1917 and so many things. He's also his son, before people blow up my Twitter, you know?
So I have one question for you, Patrick, after our session, and then we are
Yeah.
going to transition into our second thing, which is,
Sure.
you were kind of lukewarm on this movie, having watched it the first time. But
Hmm.
Tom and I both enjoyed it more the second time. After this discussion, do you think
Yeah.
if you watched How Green Was My Valley again, you will come away liking it more?
I think I would maybe like it more if I saw it in a movie theater
Mm-hmm.
and not when I was antsy on my couch midday, lights are on, I'm trying to send emails a little bit. I think all of these things are always deterrents to me liking a movie, so it was probably my fault a little bit. And I always like a movie more in a movie theater than I do in my living room. So I'm not saying I will ever watch the movie again, but I think that's also partially, this is very far out of my usual taste for different movies. Like, this is not a movie I would usually seek out on my own. Um, but maybe I would like it more. I think if the situation was very different, I think I would like it more.
So let's say if I'll put it out there, if Metrograph or one of these rep houses out here near me
Yeah,
is doing a screening, I will buy you a ticket. Let's
and I'll
go and
go.
let's see if it
And
works.
I'll go. Sure. Great.
Now we will be right back. Not with registry picks. We will be right back to talk about the PlayStation 1 game Jedi Power Battles.
Christ.
Now we are here to fulfill an obligation we talked ourselves into. That's right. We are now going to talk about the PlayStation 1 video game Jedi Power Battles. Now, Patrick, you own a copy of this game, and you said you played it earlier today, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I do want to already clear up a problem that you have with this. It is called Star Wars Episode 1 Jedi Power Battles, and it's on the PlayStation and the Sega Dreamcast. They
Mhm.
later put it on the Game Boy Advance, where they took
Uh-huh.
off the Episode 1 and just called it Jedi Power Battles. So I
Oh.
just want to clear that
Oh,
up
no, that's
in
fine.
case people are confused.
No, if we're going to be doing corrections, Patrick, then okay,
Yeah.
fine. I didn't want to do this, but I would like to point out that in our Star Wars episode,
Yeah,
you
sure.
do say we're going to talk about the game, and we can talk about Ki-Adi-Mundi's yellow lightsaber. And I'd like to point out,
It is Plo Koon.
not
It's
not
Plo
one of
Koon.
the playable Jedi's in the game. So
Well,
you know,
hey, man, I didn't want to do this. I feel really bad about this. You can unlock Ki-Adi-Mundi. He is a secret character after you
Really?
finish the game.
are you shitting
I didn't.
I
didn't wanna do this.
Ah! Is
Did
that
not wanna do
real?
this.
There were unlockable Jedi's at the end.
Now I've never beat this game, and I think I realized that today. When you beat this game, apparently you can unlock Queen Amidala if you beat it as Obi-Wan, Captain Korsh Panaka if you beat it as Obi-Wan, Darth Maul if you beat it as Qui-Gon Jinn, and on the Dreamcast only, if you beat training mode with any normal Jedi, you unlock Ki-Adi-Mundi.
Okay, so how does gameplay like do Amidala and do they have lightsabers or are they given
Probably
blasters?
just guns. I like to think they have lightsabers, but I imagine it's got to just be a gun.
Well, then if they have guns, it changes the entire dynamic. I feel like that game's so much easier then.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, I didn't make the game. You can't get mad at me.
Well, then
So-
who do I get mad
So
at?
you just because we want to get mad.
I think his name is George Walter Lucas, I want to say.
Well, you have an in with him. You do a show with him, so
Yeah.
please let him know.
Yeah. Sure.
But okay, so you have a PlayStation 1 still?
I have a PlayStation 2, but PlayStation 2 is backwards compatible
Yeah,
with all
no,
PlayStation
that's
1
okay.
games.
So you played it on the PlayStation 2. How did that work for you? Did everything work fine for you?
Now, I had to tear apart my gosh darn apartment looking for A, my PlayStation 2, and B, my CD of Jedi Power Battles. They were in separate boxes in separate rooms of my apartment. I knew I had it here because I was on Mary Houlihan's painting party a couple months ago. And for some reason, we were drawing and painting stuff. And I was like, I'm going to draw Jedi Power Battles. So I drew the cover for Jedi Power Battles. So I was like, I know it's in my apartment, and if you could see my bedroom right now, it's a disaster just because there are just boxes open. There's like Rubbermaid tubs strewn everywhere. Yeah, so I have it. I've had it since I got my PlayStation 1 in probably 2002, Christmas 2001 maybe. have had it since around then, and yeah, I was shocked when it all worked fine. I set it up on my TV in my bedroom because it was just easier to find the red, yellow, white plugs for the PlayStation to go in. It did not fill my entire screen.
Yeah.
It was kind of like when you get like an old DVD from like 2000 or something, and you have to like adjust the aspect ratio to make it fit.
Yep.
Um, it looked bad.
Yep.
The graphics looked very bad, and I
Yeah.
did not remember that.
Yeah.
And it was hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now listen, I don't want to give off the impression that I beat this whole game today, because I did beat the first level. I got through the first level, and I shockingly like remembered a lot of the first. I was like, oh, there's a guy coming up on the left. There's a guy coming
Wow,
up on the right.
really?
I played that first level so many times because it was so hard.
Yeah.
And I was shocked at how much I actually remembered it. And then I got through some of Naboo, and I died. And because I didn't have a memory card in,
Yeah.
it gave me a game over. And I was like, oh, okay, that's fine. I'll start at the beginning of the Naboo level again. And it was like, you got to do the first level again because you didn't save the game. So I said, never mind, I'm good.
Yeah, smart decision.
So we had a similar thing. Well, first off, I will confess. So we talked about Jedi Power Battles, and I was convinced I had it, and I'm pretty sure I
Yeah.
do. But my father has all that stuff, and my father has a lot of Star Wars merchandise and other merchandise, as you now know firsthand, Patrick.
Yes,
showed
it's been in my house for a year. It's in the process of being shipped out to people as we speak.
So I looked and I couldn't find it, and
Yeah.
I was so concerned about this that I just bought it cheap on eBay, which means at
Yeah.
a certain point, when I do find the original, I'm just gonna have 2 copies of Jedi Power Battles.
I love it.
And so
I mean, now Tom gets one.
Oh, lucky
I'm
me.
sure he's so excited for it.
Lucky me.
We agreed to get together this weekend to play it, which
Yeah.
I have to give credit to Tom. Normally, if I say we need to do something for the sake of a goofy bit, he goes, "You have fun with that." But it was game. I realized I did not know where the component cables were for my PlayStation. So that morning,
Amazing.
I had to run out. I had to drive a half hour away to
no.
the only GameStop that had
Oh
the
no.
component cables for it. Got to Tom's, at which point we discovered the TV in his living room, his nice TV, did not have the ports for the component cables.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like you, we had to go to his bedroom TV, except that did not actually have the proper ports for it either.
Oh no.
We plugged it into what we thought would work, and that resulted in, and I believe I tweeted a picture of the title screen at you so people can look this up. It was entirely in black and white, and there was like a weird fuzz at the top of the screen. So like you
I
said,
don't think I actually saw. I don't think I saw this. I'm gonna go find it now.
that like you said, it looked bad. It looked bad. It looks worse without color.
You don't say.
It's also impossible to know what you're actually clicking.
Yeah.
Because options like easy mode and Jedi mode, because there's 2 modes of play, everyone, are based on like which one is highlighted. Black and white, you're not getting that.
Well, I'll say this. You feel about this apparently the same way I feel about how green is my valley. I'm never going to know how green that dang valley is.
That's
and
true.
You're never going to know what the colors of this game are.
That is true.
So,
because it is indeed in black and white for us. We agreed that what we would do is we would play through each Jedi.
Oh,
So
wow.
we would start with, I believe we started with Obi-Wan. No, we started with Mace Windu.
Sure.
And agreed like we would play through his, because you get like 6 lives per Jedi.
Yeah.
We would play through his 6 lives and then move on to the next Jedi, and we either were going to beat the game or run out of Jedi. Spoilers, we ran out of Jedi and never made it past the first level.
Now, did you play normal mode or Jedi mode?
I have no fucking clue. because you
Sure.
would need the screen to be in color to know which one we selected.
Yeah.
Also, let the record show he's silent right now, but Tom did play one lifespan of Mace Windu.
Okay.
Did play it, lost, then hurled the controller back at me, said, "Fuck this, I'm getting some chocolate." And then when it was his turn again, I said, "You're up." And he just looked at me and went, "No, I'm not doing that." And proceeded to sit and just watch the gameplay. And his primary input was just telling me which Jedi to pick next.
Yeah.
For anyone
So
wondering,
wait, Tom, you didn't even get to play as everyone's favorite Jedi, Adigalia?
Sadly, I did not, because the gameplay frustrated me so much that I had to leave my one great love unplayed.
Yeah. Oh well.
So to be clear for anyone listening, your options to play is, yes, as Patrick might have noted earlier, Plo Koon, Obi-Wan, Mace Windu, Qui-Gon, and Adigalia. We all remember Adigalia. We all had the action figure. We all know her triumphant moments in the film. We don't need to go over all that.
Now listen, I do want to say this. We're joking about Adigalia. Her voice is in Rise of Skywalker.
Is she? Is it really?
She's one of the voices that says like Rise Ray up at the end.
Wow.
When she's hearing all
really?
Adigalia
clearly recorded
in Rise
3
of
weeks before
Skywalker.
it came out.
Yes.
Now, do you think? Honestly, do you think that is something where? Because this happens sometimes. Do you think this was a situation where they were like, "Let's get everybody we can," or it was a thing of, "Let's send out an email to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Let's show them how low the rate is.
Yeah.
And let's see who decides."
Well,
yeah,
they
that's
got a lot.
Work.
They got a lot of them. And to be fair, it's the actress from Clone Wars, not from the film.
Oh, okay.
Not that I don't think Jyn Clark is doing much. But
no, but I've heard that story of people who like I listen to. Do you listen to Podcast The Ride?
Yeah.
So they had somebody on once talking about like who'd done a voice in one of the rides, and they said like, "Oh yeah, you're in the ride. What's that like? What's the pay like?" And he goes, "If you got nothing else going on that day, you take it."
Sure. Yeah.
And that feels like one of those like, do you have anything else going on? No. All right.
No.
Come to Freddie Prinze Jr. Want to come stand on mic for like 5 minutes? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It'll take
less
than a half hour. Yeah. You get $500 or $750, whatever it is.
Yeah. I can't imagine there's residuals on that.
I have no
at
idea.
That level, I can't imagine. Well, you're the producer. I figured you might have an in on that one.
I'm not a residuals guy though. I just listen. I just play the video games and that's it.
And get your occasional PGA screeners.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
that's the real perk.
It's true. It's true. So we didn't like the game. That's what I'm hearing here.
I remember playing it when I was younger, and I remember getting pretty far in it.
Yeah.
And this time around, whether it was the color or the mechanic, because it's also a thing of like when you go from playing modern video games to an older vintage game.
Yes.
Like Tom has talked to me a couple times about him and friends of his. I don't remember who it was. Tom, if you want to shout them out, you're welcome to. But Tom and friends of his.
Oh, it's me and my friends Anthony and James pulling out an old N64 and trying to play GoldenEye.
Oh yeah,
and
it's a mess.
That horrible moment. Yeah, that horrible moment when you realize, oh wait, the N64 controller only had one joystick. How did we play first-person shooters?
Sure.
And then you have that nightmare experience of going, oh, this just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Great. And then you get frustrated.
Yeah.
And you leave.
It was trying. Yeah.
I've been playing my Switch a lot, and I've been downloading a lot of old games on there. So I feel like I've gotten used to seeing janky graphics again and like janky controls where I'm like, oh, they didn't port this over the best way that they could have. Like, this is very hard to play. And this, you don't have the excuse of it being, oh, this is bad controls. When they put this on a new system, they must have messed up and not really put in the work because this is the original system. But just like turning around in this game is a whole thing.
Nightmare.
It's a nightmare. It's so hard. Jumping is very hard.
Oh yeah. My god.
Yeah. There was one thing.
Conveyor belt where you have to jump across. We died like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah. Yeah. Even like running is hard. I had to like look up how to run. I was like, there's no way where I'm just supposed to walk this slow the entire time. And we should say it's like a platformer game where you're basically just walking around killing battle droids pretty much the whole time.
Battle droids that don't entirely act like battle droids.
No.
Did that strike you? Like Tom and I noticed, like it's weird that like when you first emerge, because it basically
Yes.
the first level is similar to the actual Episode 1 PlayStation game, which I
Yeah,
played the shit out of.
of course.
Where you emerge, like TC-14 guides you out of the chamber, right?
Yeah.
You don't cut your way out, but you walk out and you are swarmed by 5 battle droids. And in all of our time seeing battle droids in not just Episode 1, but or in the prequels, but in Clone Wars, they shoot blasters. It's what they do.
Yes. Yeah.
Why do 5 of them swarm you and proceed to punch you?
Uh-huh.
Punch
Now-
you and throw in little kicks.
Well, here's the other thing. When you get later in the level, and I don't know if you even got to this, you come up on destroyer droid.
We did, yeah. We came up with destroyer droids.
Now, did the destroyer droids punch you? Because they
No,
punched me. They
really?
punched me.
Why?
I don't know. I have no idea.
What a great game. How did we play games back then? What were
I don't
we
know.
even doing?
I
Like,
mean,
just
the-
what the hell?
But that
Yeah,
the
bad
episode
ideas.
1 game is the episode
The episode-
1 game is fun.
The Episode 1 game was fun. Pod Racer ruled.
Yeah,
remember
yeah.
Pod
I've been
Racer
playing
before
Pod
that.
Racer on my Switch.
Yeah, it
a
holds
lot.
up really,
Yeah.
really well.
Yeah.
Right. We got about I'll tell you where we maxed out. Because we only got to one point, which is because you're right about like remembering the patterns and all.
Mhm.
When we started, I was trying to rack up as much points as possible. So like you can use your lightsaber to destroy the consoles. You can take out the TC-14 droids,
Yeah.
and you get extra points for that. After a while, I was like, I don't care. I just want to get this.
Yes, that's how I was too.
We got to the point. There's a point where you're running out on these platforms, and there is a big ship that's
Mhm.
shooting laser blasts
Mhm.
at you. And at first, I'm just like, I'm at a complete loss. I'm going, what the fuck are we supposed to do with this? And finally,
Yeah.
Tom, because mind you, Tom has not been playing for a while and has
Sure.
just been observing, so Tom is able to view things rationally instead of through the blind rage I was in at that point. And points out like, oh, I think you're supposed to deflect the blasts back
Yeah.
at the ship.
Yeah.
Right. The problem is they also have battle droids swarming you as you're doing this.
Yeah.
So it's a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Finally, I'm bouncing them back.
Sure.
And the only time we came close, I destroyed that ship once. One
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And in the most infuriating moment, I destroyed the ship. So I deflect, because it blasts you twice. It shoots 3 blasts at you, you deflect it, and then it shoots another 3.
Mm-hmm.
I deflect the blasts for the final time. As it's shooting its second blast, I take out the ship, and one of the last blasts it let off hits me and kills me. I have attended full feature-length comedies with Tom where he has laughed less than he did in that moment. As we successfully
That's so funny.
defeated the ship only to die.
Uh-huh.
It was
Never got
perfect.
further than
It was
that.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was not until we were on our 5th of 5 Jedis, on our second to last life.
Who we
Tom,
talking?
who
We
did we
talking
save for
Plo?
last? No,
Plo
Plo
Koon?
Koon we
Who we
did pretty
talking?
quick. I think it was Mace.
Qui-Gon.
Qui-Gon was the last. It was Mace,
Sure.
Plo Koon,
Yeah.
Adigalia, Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon. We were on our last Jedi, second to last life.
Sure.
And it is only then that Tom notices and points out to me, oh, those little things that you're running and picking up immediately, I think some of those are health points
Mm-hmm.
to give you health back. You're not
Yes.
supposed to grab them right away.
Yeah.
Had no idea. Because it's like
Yeah.
there's little things you can pick up along the way, and I think some of them are... I think each Jedi has some kind of special ability that I think is supposed to be triggered by hitting a button that I could not figure out the button for.
Yeah. Plo. Well, Plo. There's one that if you get it, it gives you a really big lightsaber.
That we got. Yes, the big lightsaber
Okay.
we had.
Yeah.
But it was tough.
And it is
'cause
very.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying it was tough because especially with the black and white and all that, I genuinely was questioning Tom, like, is this a graphics glitch or is this a real thing?
That's very funny. Yeah, I was shocked by how hard it was, and then I was like, I get why I never got far in this game as a kid. I'm like looking at the levels, and I'm like genuinely trying to figure out how far I probably got, and I feel like maybe I got to Tatooine, maybe. That's like level 5. But I played this game so much that I'm like, how did I not beat it?
It's telling that I forget if we said this on mic or not. It's telling that when Patrick Willems was here on an episode, I don't know if that's coming up before or after this, but Patrick Willems was here, and after we finished recording, we were telling him about this upcoming episode, and we were telling him about it. And when we mentioned Jedi Power Battles, he said, "Oh, I remember that. There's this level that is impossible," and it's telling how hard this game is. That decades later, you
Yeah.
can still remember what a nightmare it was.
Yeah. And I'm trying to remember what other did you guys play Star Wars video games at the time?
Oh, I mean,
Some, yeah.
for me, for sure. I mean, we bought
I'm
the
trying to remember
N64
Go
just to
ahead.
have Pod Racer. Masters
Yeah.
of Terracasi
What
was
was
a big one.
What was that
Yeah.
Shadow Recruit? What's the
Oh,
Shadow
yes,
Shadows of the Empire?
Shadows of the Empire.
Shadows
Yeah,
of the
that one I
Empire?
played.
Yeah.
That was
That one I
N64.
played,
Yeah.
yeah.
I did a lot of Galactic Battlegrounds
Hell,
was
oh,
what it was called.
yes, the Civilization game. Oh my god,
I
yes.
loved
That was
Galactic
so
Battlegrounds.
good.
And I've desperately wanted to play it again. There's got to
Yeah.
be some emulator or something out there. But I'm like, if you guys put that on Switch, I would play the hell out of it for so long. I played this a lot. I played Episode 1 a lot. Trying to remember what other I think I had a Attack of the Clones for my Game Boy. But those were like the big ones for me.
Episode 1 I played a lot, and I'm gonna sell out my father a little bit on this one because we would play that
Yeah.
together because I was like 8 or 9.
Sure.
There's a moment early on in the original Episode 1 game where you're Obi-Wan, you and you're Obi-Wan, you're running with Qui-Gon. You're running along this like platform, and there's a gap. Qui-Gon jumps over the gap, you jump and fall down a chute. And now you have to navigate some like underground tunnel system with the droids rolling around and everything. And so I did that. The first time it was me, and I went and I fell, and it looked like I just missed the jump. And
Yeah.
that was avoidable. And
Yeah.
so my father insisted like that's avoid like no, we gotta redo it,
Uh-huh.
make the jump. And in my child mind, this was like hours of us just sitting there like trying to make the jump and getting madder and madder that the
Yeah.
game wouldn't let us make the jump, neither of us thinking that it was not a possibility.
That's so funny.
Like seemingly thinking that this was like that new Far Cry game that they had where if you just sit in the same spot you win. Like the same kind of thing where you know about that, right? Have you heard about this?
No, I don't know about this.
I don't know if it's the newest one, but there was one Far Cry game.
I think it's just a recurring element in the Far Cry
Yeah.
games where if you, with the opening of the game, if you just stay in place instead of go run out and execute people and shit, if like you wait for like 10 minutes, the bad guy comes back and just explains everything to you and the game ends.
That's
Yeah.
so funny.
Yeah, so you win. But yeah,
That's
so
funny.
that was how we I vividly remember that, like trying to make that jump. I got pretty far in Episode 1, but Jedi Power Battles just I feel like that was one that I probably gave up on because
Sure.
I've never been. I played video games a lot as a kid, particularly like a Sims or like a Galactic Battlegrounds. But I feel like I was always a person where if I reached if I had to do something a certain number of times, in a game, I just gave up.
Yeah.
Like I just went like, no, this isn't. I think I said to Tom, I think I said to you when we started it up, like my big thing with video games is there should be an option for busier people, where it's just like where there's the option of, hey, you failed to make this jump or solve this puzzle 5 times. You want to just skip ahead to the next part of the story? I would love
Yeah.
that. That would make me so immensely happy.
And I feel like some games did have that at some point. Like if you were on a certain level of difficulty, there were options for that. But
Yeah.
I was not a big gamer growing up. I remember I did not have a lot of consoles, so I would go over a lot of friends' house to play them. But like we got a PS1 when PS2 came out, and we got a PS2 when PS3 came out. Like we were a full generation behind. And I remember, and of course I did not have any money at the time, so my parents were buying the games for me.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the games my parents bought us was Chicken Run.
Oh,
the
I had
game-
that. Yep.
And it was so hard.
Yeah.
And my friend would come over and we would play it just because we knew how frustrating it was. And to this day, we still talk about like how difficult that game was. And I think that holds the spot in Jedi Power Battles holds for other people. Because at the time, I did not realize how frustrating Jedi Power Battles was. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like the peak of entertainment. And now I'm like, oh, I'm probably never going to play this again.
So as we wind down, Patrick, I do want to make a pitch to you. Okay.
Sure, that's great because I have a pitch for you.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, so go ahead.
Okay. You want me to go first? Fine. All right.
Yeah, I want you to go first.
I was gonna say, because this was a weirdly anticipated episode. Again, it was a thing that we said, and probably if nobody else had brought it up to me,
Yeah,
we probably would have forgotten about.
of course.
But it has been brought up, and when it has been brought up to other people on the show, I want you to know that anyone who knows you, when I say this, just goes, "Yeah, okay, yeah." I believe David Sims' exact response when we explained it all just went, "Yeah, that sounds like Patrick." So your brand is known. I wanted to
Great.
make a pitch to you,
Yeah.
which is, if you're open to it, you are welcome to pick another piece of Star Wars ephemera, and we
Yeah.
will have you back in season 3 to talk about a different film and make the latter half of that episode a discussion on whatever piece of Star Wars ephemera comes to your mind right now. We will do our research. If
I
you
mean,
have
that's
one-
really yes. Now I had one in mind, but I feel like it's maybe too easy. So I sort of want. Hang on, give me like 1 second. You can edit this out if you want.
I love
just
that you,
want to.
I love that you had one in mind. Was that your pitch? Or
Yes.
do you have okay? So we were on the same page here.
We were on the exact same page.
Fantastic.
Now
Amazing.
here, oh gosh, I mean this might be hard. Now here's what I'm thinking. Oh, okay. You know what? No, this game is available for PlayStation 2. This might be easier than I thought it was. Okay,
It's another
here's
game.
my pitch. Yes.
Wait, hang on. It's a PS2 game?
Yes.
Can I guess?
Yes.
Is it Super Bombad Racers?
No.
Fuck. I really thought I had that one. All
Nope.
right.
I want to watch the Monterey Pop Festival movie, which I believe is on the list.
But that's not in season 3.
What's
that
on
was
season?
inducted
Well,
later. We'll talk about the movies
Oh,
for season
okay.
3 later. We'll look at the list more concisely once we have that sorted out. But what's
Okay.
what? I do like that you called your shot
My
on the Monterey Pop Festival,
Yeah.
which I think would
When
be
you
in
get
like
to that.
season 20.
Great. When you get to it, it's mine.
It's locked in, that deal. Okay, fine.
Oh, I see. That was inducted in 2018.
Yeah.
So
we would-
wait, what year is season 3? Give me the year.
It's 1991.
1991. All right, give me 1 second,
1991.
and I will pick the movie. Hang on.
Oh
Done.
God. Oh no.
I'm gonna say. Well, I'm gonna do one that I want to talk about this time. That's the thing.
I think you've earned it.
I think so. Let's do. Oh, I know what I want to do.
Okay.
I want to do Frankenstein and Star Wars Bounty Hunter.
Done and done.
Frankenstein meets Star
Yep.
Wars Bounty
This-
Hunter.
Gentlemen, Bounty Hunter's available. It's a PS2 emulated version for the PS4, so
Yeah.
it is available.
Kyle, I have the fucking PS2 game. What are we talking about? Of course I have it here. I have it here, and it's another game I think I got up to like level 2 on and then couldn't get further. It's a pain in the ass.
All right, we're playing it at your house this time, not black and white bullshit.
Now, I'll say this. I remember this game ruling. I remember this game being a lot of fun. We'll see. I'll say this. I remember the first level is called Dead or Alive Miko. That is the name of the first level.
Can I tell you something, Patrick? The best thing about this is that in season 2, for this season, you ended up with How Green Was My Valley that no one is
Mhm.
clamoring for. And in this one, you managed to pick a movie that I am thinking of every person who has said they want to come back on, and every single one of
I
them.
could change it.
No.
Okay.
I want to tell people. I want to specifically tell, like,
Yeah.
when we send like Phil Iscove or Patrick Willems the list and they go,
Yeah.
wasn't Frankenstein on here? I
Yeah.
want to tell them Patrick Cotton called it, and half of it is going to be about a PS2
Yeah.
bounty hunter.
Well, now
thing.
here's the thing. 91 is a good year. There's a lot
Oh,
of
yeah.
good ones that year. So I knew there would be other stuff. I knew it was taking a good one, but I knew there would be other good ones. And I will have a lot more to say about Frankenstein, I think.
You did not want to jump on Gigi?
No, I didn't. I didn't. I did read it quick, and I did think it was Gigli. And I was like, I'm shocked that was in
No,
there.
I'll just say for our listeners, if you were surprised that this episode started with me and Tom both admitting I didn't quite get why this was in there when I first saw it, and you want more of that in season 3.
Mhm.
Not a Gigi guy. Gonna be a fun one. Got to figure out my in. That was another one I watched. Like, oh, let's see all the best pictures. Oh, okay.
You know what you guys should do for that episode though?
What?
You should watch Gigi and Gigli.
I've seen Gigli. I tried to
Yeah.
get Tom to watch Gigli once, and he just said,
Tom,
looked
come
at me guys and
on,
said,
have
"No."
some fun, Tom. Come on.
Listen, if it becomes a bit for the show, I guess I'll have to do it.
Hey,
Yeah.
I-
There we go.
I like the fact that I can't get Tom to do silly shit, but Patrick Cotner has apparently figured out the key to it.
I don't know how I did it. I
I'm-
don't know how
It's
I did it.
about being against Mike. That's
Yeah,
the trick.
that's it. That's fair.
We just gotta
and
both
I'll-
be against Mike, and that's it.
Yeah, I'll always be on your side there.
Yeah, perfect. Exactly. He knows how to play the game, Mike. You
Uh-huh.
idiot.
The game being Jedi Power Battles.
Yes, because Mike didn't know how to play the game.
Yeah.
Patrick, thank you so much for joining us. Do you have anything you want to plug?
Oh man. Yeah, I mean, listen, watch the George Lucas Talk Show. We're doing it basically monthly at this point. You can watch it live at planetscum.live, or you can watch any of the old episodes on YouTube. I recommend just finding a guest that you like and watching that. You know, we've had Whoopi Goldberg, we've had Kevin Smith, we've had Jason Mantzoukas, Darcy Carden,
Robert
Julian
Wool.
Glover, Robert Wool. Yeah, there's literally hundreds of people that we've had on. I recommend finding the guests that you like and watching it that way. I also produce a show called Rat Scraps, which is an improv show in New York where famous people come in and tell stories. And then people do improv based off of it. It's very fun. It's very silly. You can come see it in person every Sunday when there's not a huge COVID spike in New York. Or you can stream it from anywhere in the world, full HD 3-camera setup. It's like $8 or something. It's a great deal. And then you can follow me on Twitter at Patrick Cotner, PatrickCotnoyr. I'm currently trying to get more followers than the canceled NBC show The Blacklist Redemption. I'm very close. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. But that's about it.
You
right
want to
now, I
know? You
think.
want to know how long ago it was when you were last here?
Oh,
You
gosh.
hadn't beaten 1,600 pen yet on the follower count.
Yeah. Do you know the date of when I was here last? Because it feels like a very long time
I don't
ago.
offhand, but it was a long time because you were one of the.
Was it 2020? It could have been 2020, right?
Probably.
The last time you were on here was August 24th of 2020.
Wow.
A lot happened since then. Lot
Yeah.
has happened. I was re-listening to the Star Wars episode, and I heard I said just 2 weeks ago they made you sing "That's Amore" with the words "That's a
God.
Snore," and you said to them, "I don't like to be on camera." And in the time since then, you're not only on every episode the full time,
Yeah.
but you did a New York Comic-Con panel where you simultaneously appeared on stage and on screen,
That's true.
filming yourself talking
Yeah.
about your experience as a PA on Ghostbusters Afterlife. So
No, Ghostbusters Answer the Call.
Ghostbusters
don't
After the
get.
Call.
Don't.
Oh my God! Yeah,
don't
you're
you?
right,
How dare you mix me up with Ghostbusters Afterlife? How dare you?
you were not.
Oh.
You were not the PA for Muncher on Ghostbusters Afterlife.
No. I mean, I would have liked that though. That's the one. That's the one good gig. What a weird couple of years. Thank you for having me, guys.
Thank you for joining us. Absolutely. And for anybody, like you said, Rat Scraps, I was wondering how that was going to work as a live stream. I have been a regular watcher of the live streams, and they work great. You feel like you're there. I highly
That's great.
recommend checking that out. And we will see you next year for Frankenstein
Mhm.
and Bounty
meets
Hunters.
Django Fett.
Can't wait.
I hope to God that like some big time horror producer or director like finds the show and goes, "Guys, I'd love to be on. You got Frankenstein," and we have to look them in the eyes and just go, "Sorry, sir. Will you settle for poor little rich girl?"
Listen,
We
I'll
have
say
to
this.
talk
I'll say
PS2's
this.
Bounty
If that
Hunter.
happens, I am happy to give up Frankenstein as long as you will watch all of the sequels to that Frankenstein. That's my one trade-off.
Oh, I have.
That's something we've both done already.
Okay. Me
We're
too.
those people. Patrick, thank you for joining us, but the rest of you, stick around because we'll be right back with our picks for the National Film Registry.
The National Film Registry isn't some fixed object, frozen in time. It's always growing, adding new titles every year. These annual selections are made by the National Film Preservation Board, with members like Martin Scorsese, Alfre Woodard, and Leonard Maltin, and representatives from organizations like the Academy, the DGA, and the AFI coming together to debate and decide. But they don't just pull titles out of thin air. They pull from the public, people like you and us, who can submit their nominations for the registry in a form on the Library of Congress's website. What we do, at the end of each episode, is have Mike and Tom pick films not yet in the registry that they feel should be, inspired by that day's topic. At the end of each season, those films will be formally submitted to the National Film Registry for consideration on behalf of You're Missing Out. Here are today's picks. All right, boys, time for our registry picks. A reminder to our listeners, it must be an American film that's at least 10 years old.
So my pick, I was thinking about, there were a lot of things I could go with. This was one of those films where there wasn't an instant one-to-one, where I saw the name on the list and went, oh, well, of course, this is the movie. It wasn't one of those cases, and there were a number of things that I was thinking about tangentially related, but the thing about this movie that really stuck out to me, and I mentioned this during our episode, is that it's one of those movies about the end of an era, about a time lost, a sense of home that is lost, and a family coming apart because of it. This strong father figure and mother figure whose children, one by one, start to go away and eventually have to leave their home. That's the thing that really struck me. And as a result, then something really stuck out, about the passage of time, which is a film from 1971, a musical film that it does kind of surprise me isn't in the registry, which is Norman Jewison's adaptation of Fiddler on the Roof, the 1964 Broadway musical. It's a movie that I think I had heard when I was growing up. I didn't see it because there's a lot of controversy. Well, not controversy, but there are people who think Zero Mostel should have played the role instead of Topol because he would have played it more comedically. But when I finally saw it, it's an incredibly powerful epic. I mean, the story of Fiddler on the Roof is deeply moving about this Jewish family in the town of Anatevka, and the family comes apart. And the beautiful thing about Fiddler on the Roof, both in its stage musical and its film version, it is a movie about tragedy in a sense, but it is joyful and exuberant and defiantly Jewish, and this clinging to a culture that is torn apart in modernity. Now, of course, there is an adaptation of Sholem Aleicham's Tevye the Dairyman stories we'll actually be covering next season on the pod, with the film titled Tevye. But that is, of course, that is not the musical that everybody knows. That is not, Fiddler on the Roof is such an impressive undertaking. And not only that, when you look at that year, of the eligible Best Picture nominees in the registry from that year, French Connection, A Clockwork Orange, and The Last Picture Show are all in the registry. The fifth nominee, Nicholas Alexandra, is not eligible, meaning Fiddler on the Roof is the only one out of those Best Picture nominees that's eligible that isn't in, and it's very surprising to me that it isn't in. It's a staple of many people's households. Despite its length, it can be an annual viewing for many people. You even have John Williams doing his take on Jerry Bach's score, which is deeply moving. Great cinematography from Oswald Morris. It's a really powerful film, a really triumphant movie, and I do believe that Fiddler on the Roof deserves a place in the National Film Registry.
Can't go wrong there. Can't go wrong there. So it's funny because Mike says he had a hard time finding a one-to-one for this movie. It took a little looking for me too, but I came upon one that was kind of like, oh, okay, this is kind of a no-brainer once I laid my eyes on it. It is the first film from a filmmaker that I've really come to appreciate over the last few years. One whose filmography I've been working through and I'm almost done with, and one where you look at the grand scope of his work, you go, I don't know how he's done all these different kinds of things, but also you see him in everything, so it does make sense in a way, which kind of ties it to Ford as well. His first movie came out in 2000. It's a part of the Criterion Collection. It is centered on the youth point of view in a town that's clearly riddled with economic disparity because of a business, one of those factories that maybe isn't playing fair with money or work or what have you, or just that that days have been better, and that the factory's just not doing as well as it used to, with a little bit of that poetic kind of wistful look back with an honesty to it as well. It shows another adept quality that Ford had with, but his adept work with Roddy McDowall. This guy is great with children, working with children throughout so many of his movies. And I think it's great. I think it's a pretty great movie. And I think as for what it is and for what it signified for the career to come, I think 2000's George Washington should be in the National Film Registry. I think it's great. And it kicked off David Gordon Green's career, which in turn kicked off Danny McBride's career, which in turn led to so many great movies and TV, and just one of the most interesting careers I think we have right now. So I definitely think it should be in for many, many reasons. I think it's a great movie.
Let's all go to the lobby.
Thank you again to Patrick Kottner for joining us. Next week, our Pawnee political pal returns to the show. Amanda Rush is back for 1960s primary. Don't forget to follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you again next time. Here on You're Missing Out.
They honor movies of historical, cultural, or aesthetic importance on the National Film Registry.